the value of a new patient or the value of prioritizing new patients is all about shifting or pivoting your practice to a different arena. We've been misled to believe that dentistry, more specifically the dental business, has to be complicated. Dentistry can be simple, and dentistry should be simple.
Welcome back to the Dentistry Made Simple podcast. I am Meredith, your co-host, joined by the host, TBONE.
This guy.
He's back again.
In the same shirt.
Yes, most of them. Well, before we get started on today's
That's because
episode,
you have a face for radio.
Someone also said I had a voice for radio, okay?
That's a compliment.
Well, you know what? I'm going to start wearing a mask again on the podcast.
You know I'm messing with you, Mayor Bear.
All right. Before we get started on today's episode, we are going to talk about the value of a new patient. You know, and we shouldn't really say the value because we're going to talk about how what the value is not monetarily. Yeah. But I have a review for you. If you have not left us a review, we would love for you to either leave us a Apple Podcast review or even a Google review for 3D Dentist if you have attended a course before as our one and only sponsor. This is for the podcast, 5 stars, influential and practical. Just wanted to say I'm a big fan of the podcast. I found it recently and have been binging on it a ton. It's like they're Netflixing. It's been a great influence on me as I get ready to purchase a practice. In the process of developing my own financial menu, thank you for the content you guys put out. I don't know their name, but thank you for the nice review.
What does that thank you mean after the last episode,
Meredith? In a nice way, thank you. Yeah, now we've turned ourselves around. We can't even say that to anyone anymore. Well, before we get started, just want to remind you all that 3D Dentist is a great place to come join us at the retreat if you want to do digital CE that moves the needle, that changes the way you practice, and want to come meet great people that are kind of in the same boat as you. I think that's valuable to the community.
You sounded so excited there, Meredith.
The people that, no, it is exciting, but the people that are kind of going through the same things you are, I like to see the bonds that people create by
that is very nice.
The community. Yeah. Well, let's get into today's episode.
Yeah. So before we get started, I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of set the stage. You know, a lot of times we often hear the value of a new patient as a dollar amount is for $400, $500, $600, or the lifetime value of a new patient is $20,000 over 20 years or whatever it is. And really, that's not at all what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about, the value of a new patient or the value of prioritizing new patients is all about shifting or pivoting your practice to a different arena. You know, a lot of times I hear dentists, they'll come and say, you know, I've learned these clinical skills. I want to do more of this, but insurance is so big in my practice, or this is that, or my patients don't say yes to the dentistry that they need or that they want, or I want them to do. And then I'll say, well, tell me about your new patient flow. Oh man, I'm so busy on recalls. And I'm like, well, that's the problem is you've got to change your practice. You know, and oftentimes people think of changing the practice as team members themselves, and sometimes you just got to change your customer base, and that doesn't mean you need to sell your practice and start over, but it may mean that you have to do a slow revamp or rebrand of the patients, the culture of your practice, to kind of go on a couple of episodes. You know, and the patients also are part of the culture of your practice. And so sometimes we have to do that. And that's why one of the things we focus on in our mastermind and in our 3D business bootcamp that I lead is about the value of new patients and how we set the stage of the culture of our practice through our new patient process. So today we just kind of want to talk about the value of a new patient, kind of that process, and kind of hopefully have you think differently about how you need to view new patients. Yeah, so where do we start, Meredith?
Well, I wanted to add something too, kind of about that. One of the things a lot of the masterminders call me and they ask me, they say, you know, a lot of times people call and say, what would TBONE or Sully do? Yeah. And
why don't they just ask us directly?
Because you guys are busy. Because you guys are busy. I'm easier to get a hold of. So they'll call and they'll say, you know, my hygienist patient canceled. What did TBONE? Do they have them call recalls when their patient cancels? And I answer a question with a question. Wonder where I learned that. Yeah. I say, do you have openings in the schedule for recalls? That's their first instinct. Call recalls. Where are you going to put these recalls? Yeah. Right? We're full. We're booked out. I said, so instead, there's other things they could do. So I know one thing Sully says is he'd rather have a hygienist watch an implant being placed, or he'd rather have someone watch a treatment coordinator going over something. He'd rather them coach and if you're not available to do it, let someone else train them, let them learn something else, than sit there in a back room calling patients that someone else could be doing that's not as valuable to closing treatment cases and that kind of thing.
It's not about getting another $80 in a recall.
Right. So, and then where are you going to put them?
Yeah.
So that's the
Well,
thing.
I tell you where they put them. They put them in lieu of new patients.
Right. So that's exactly what I was going to say is we chase these recalls, these people that don't even want to come in. They haven't called and made their own appointment. Why are we going to take care of them and teach them that we'll just call you?
And 50% of them don't show up.
And they don't, because they don't want to come. Instead of blocking, if a patient cancels, block it for a new patient. Because then a new patient, if you have the time, if there, is enough time, then a new patient will call and will say, well, we don't have anything for 6 weeks, right? So we did this during the mastermind, is like we called a couple of each other's offices and asked when we could get our next new patient. And some of the offices, it was 6, 8, 10 weeks, 3 months, October, 6 months. And that's because they're filled up with recall with nothing in between, and there's not enough room for it. So, chasing the recalls and not blocking for new patients is something that probably starts the whole.
Yeah. So it's a great topic to talk on. And it's a topic I'll probably talk out of both sides of my mouth a little bit.
Yeah.
In the sense that, look, the part of the value of a dental business is the recall base, is the consistent revenue, the patients that come in, the customer base, right? But at the same time, that recall base needs to be a good recall base, right? And so, we've all heard the saying, we have A patients, B patients, C patients, and we want our practice to be full of A patients. And I kind of take that to heart. And for me, we don't invite back patients that we don't think fit the culture of our practice.
Right. So if they're on that recall list, there might be a reason. You might not know why.
So we try to not invite them back.
Right.
In other words, and we're passive about it. I wish we were a little bit more aggressive sometimes, but we're very passive about it. But that's good because we just say, hey, you know what? Great news. Just call us in 6 months. And, more than likely they'll forget.
And everyone else is scheduled. Well, and people are always like, well, we don't accept new patients. We don't need any new patients.
And that's
like,
absolutely not true.
You always need new. There's always people moving away.
We all need new customers.
There's always people, and then that kind of gets us into why new patients are so great is if you're looking to revamp your practice and you do want to finally change the way patients are being seen and the culture and how you're scheduling and the diagnostics of what you're doing. If, we will only see patients who do these x-rays. We'll have a full CBCT. We'll have 4 bite wings and 3 PAs, and we'll have a scan on every new patient. You start doing that on old patients and they're like, why are we doing this now?
Right.
Well, technology has changed and you have to explain yourself. New patients, they don't know any different. They think this place is great.
It's a blank slate.
They think this place is great. They do everything. They have everything. And it just makes it easier because from the bat, they're excited and willing to do anything that you ask.
Really it's about creating an inventory.
Yes.
Right? Like your hygiene system, your hygiene department, your hygiene schedule, it's an inventory. It should be an inventory of, I'm making up numbers here, of 20% new patients, 80% recalls, or 30% new patients, 70% recalls, or 50% new patients, 50% recalls, whatever that is.
Depending on where your practice is.
Yeah. And so set that, right? And then, because here's what will happen. Your practice will get overrun with recalls and never prioritize new patients. And the vast majority, a good percentage of the dentistry and especially the newer procedures and the more complex dentistry is being done on new patients who are coming to you seeking this type of dentistry out. And yes, tomorrow I have a case on a 10-unit cosmetic case on a patient. We've talked about this for 10, 15 years.
Right.
But that does happen.
Right.
But we do more cosmetic cases on patients who come to us looking for that than on patients we've talked about this for 10 years to do this, right? And so it's a delicate, it is an absolute delicate balance. But we're living in a time where people move way more often than before. We're living in a time where
people are
insurances changes way more often than before.
Yeah.
And so we have to have a mentality that new patients are important. We cannot have the mentality that we want to grow our practice to where we get if you're not bringing new patients in and new blood into your practice is very quickly going to get stagnant, and not so great things are going to happen. And that might take 3, 4, 5, 10 years to happen, but it will happen. You have to have new patients because they bring lifeblood, they bring excitement into your practice, they allow you to use new procedures, they are more willing to accept new technology, and more importantly, new patients invite more people like them. Your recall patients, especially the ones that don't do the dentistry,
Right.
they only invite more like themselves.
Right.
And so it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. So, this week I wanted to have a short, quick episode that just kind of reframes our view on new patients. And honestly, I often have people in our mastermind that say, what's your process of calling overdue patients? I say there is no process.
Right.
I rather focus our energy and attention and money on bringing in new patients than begging people to come back into my practice. And fortunately, we're in a market where new patients are available, and we're doing the things that make it available for new patients.
And we're making our schedule available for them.
Yeah, and we're prioritizing.
We'll push out recalls.
Yep. We will push out recalls versus pushing out new patients.
Yeah.
I know we hate Spectrum and Time Warner because they value new customers more than their existing customers, but there's a good business lesson to be learned.
And they're making
behind that.
They're making less on their new customers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of goes with the, the old patients trust you, but
sometimes they don't do the dentistry.
We're wasting our time presenting the same dentistry to them every 6 months for years before they do anything, or if they ever do it at all. Every time they come in, they say that I'm interested in veneers. Well, you need to do aligners first. And they say, okay, I'm going to do it. And then 6 months later, it's the same thing.
Same
it's
conversation.
the same thing.
And look, there's a value to planting seeds because not everybody's ready and it's got to fit in their time. I'm not saying be dismissive
and it'll
of patients.
be down the road. But to have a new patient come in who's ready to commit,
it's
and
supply
you need
and
that
demand.
too. You need some patients that are going to do it now, and you need some patients that are going to do it later.
It's absolute supply and demand. Look, at the end of the day, your office has a limited supply. We have an almost unlimited demand, certainly in today's times.
Yeah.
So be very selective of who you allow back into your practice, and remember, it's your name on the door. So hopefully we're giving some value and some ways to think about differently about the value of a new patient in your practice. And so remember to prioritize new patients and push out your recalls. We'll see you next week on the Dentistry Made Simple podcast.